Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Beyond the Label podcast. This is your host, Leanne. And today we have a guest all the way recording with us in San Francisco. His name is Astro, the founder of Murror. And he moved to San Francisco from Vietnam 10 years ago. And we'll dive deep into that later on. So, hi, Astro. Very nice to have you with us today.
Hey, Leon, thank you for having me. I'm super grateful, and this is such a great opportunity for me to speak with you.
Great. Just a little bit backstory for the audience. Me and Nastro connected on Facebook. I was very inspired by his story after he posted on the Facebook group Subtle Asian Traits. So, do you just want to tell the audience a little bit about what you shared and a little bit about your story?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Astro. I came from Vietnam, and I had a journey on self-discovery and mental health. I grew up in a family where, my mom and dad divorced at a very, at a very young age, and that unfortunately impacted you know, um, my mental health. And for that reason, I became very isolated and grew up, keeping everything inside. But I, like spent a lot of time at work, try to win myself back and try to put meaning into, my life, even though I have always asked the question, who am I? Why do I exist? Because after my parents divorced, um, they went separate ways and they have their own families, and I was living on my own at a very young age, around 16 or so. And during that time, it was the most difficult time in my life, and being, on my own and knowing what to do next and how to live my life. I was struggling a lot. But after many years, I managed to landed, a good career. I've been, it got me to the States working for different companies. And in the past 6 years, I've been working for like big tech companies like Google and Meta, leading in product design, especially in artificial intelligence. And now I'm here. And 1 year and a half ago, I started my own company on mental health. And I feel like this is my destiny. And I started to share my story with the world. And fortunately, it went viral. And I guess this is how me and Leanne met. And we have this opportunity to talk.
Well, first of all, I have so many questions. Like everything from when you described your childhood, like you were living by yourself and you were supporting yourself, how did that suddenly jump into like working for like Google and all these big firms? Like, how do you find your motivation and your passion in that process? Because you mentioned that you're an expert in graphic design, product design, and many of these things. Like, so how does that come about? How does those two link up together?
Yeah, awesome. This is a great question. So I grew up, doing hand drawing, as a hobby. And I kept doing that over the years when I was lonely. I never felt like I wanted to talk to anybody when I was a kid. And my dad had a computer, a PC, and when he was not at home, or every time I came to his house to visit him, you know, I didn't have anything else to do to have fun, so I just like play with his computer, and I found Microsoft Paint, as a very simple, software for me to draw, paint, but on a computer. And it started from there when I was in fifth grade. Um, and I kept doing it like every time I have free time. I just jump on the computer and draw and draw and draw. And ultimately, it became a hobby, a great hobby for me to escape. And by the time I graduated from high school, right off the bat, I got a job, just because I did a poster from my dad, and I met him at a coffee shop, and I gave him the poster. But then there's another person sitting next to him, and he suggested me to come to his company for an interview, and that's how I got my first job. my very first interview, my very first job. Um, it was a publishing company, and I didn't even know that I could make money out of, I didn't even know that it was called graphic design. But that's how I got started. But it started from like a passion for drawing, and I started very early, and just like the book, The Outliers, and it goes back to that 10,000 hours rule. And I'm so lucky that I started very, very early. That 10,000 hours started extremely early, so that by the time I graduated from high school, I just had you know, uh, the opportunity to get started very early.
And I actually also want to ask about the journey within. So now you've shared about, how this happened, like how you got your first interview and your first job. And on the other side, on another level, you mentioned that you were a bit like isolated and I would assume a little bit shy and you were just, focusing on your art basically. So how did that also lead up to, acing on those interviews? And I would assume that, working at like Google and Meta, you need to go through a lot of interviewing process. And now obviously you're speaking on a podcast and, sharing on all these major platforms. So what does that journey within and that self growth look like? Because I think a lot of us are curious, and there also might be people listening right now, who are at that very beginning stage, like what you said, feeling a little bit isolated, feeling a little bit shy. So, how do I get to where you are now?
Yeah, yeah. It is a little bit personal to share all of this, but when I was started out my first job, I didn't have anybody to talk to or any friends, and I felt extremely lonely. And sometimes I wish I could talk to somebody, or express my emotions with somebody, but then I felt stuck. And when I felt stuck, I had only one option, was to you know draw or do computer graphics and stuff, and it kept me going, and it became a friend. It became a coping mechanism. It became a sole purpose of my existence. And I did it maybe just to kill time at that moment. But right after I got my first job, I all the money that I made, it was just like $300 a month. But I took the money, I went to bookstores and bought books, and went home and studied at night after work. And I repeated that like for 4 years. No friends, no nothing. Just me, work, and self-taught myself design. Um, at the same time, I had rage and anger in me, because I kept asking myself, like, why everything happened to me this way. I always felt unfair, and that rage told me, to do your best. If life giving you two options, either you give up or show to people that even if you're in this situation, you're going to be somebody. And I told myself to take the second path, which is I'll be somebody, to win back my life. And it became the drive, even though it started from a very negative place, but it gave me so much like energy. It's like a yin and yang thing. Like on one side is so negative, but you're using that negative energy. It's so big and it's so massive that it gives you the energy to keep trying every day to be better, or to be someone that that's going to escape from this situation. And I think that's my world within. Was about like survival, was about like self education, and was about like discovering who I am, and why am I here. And I think that was the main driving factor for me to keep going. And by the time after 4 years working as a graphic designer, and then I saw the iPhone came out, and that's when everything changed. Now I can see that design doesn't have to be static. You can interact with it. And I thought, okay, let's get started on this. And that's when I go out there, find engineers, and partner with me, and build the very first apps. And And for some reason, it got featured by Apple for something like best app of the day or the week. And at the time, it was a big deal. And it's because I started so early that by the time, the App Store becomes more dominant, I've already had a lot of experience in the field. And that's how I got opportunities to come to the States and work and be here in San Francisco. Um, and when I came to San Francisco, I was working for startups, but utilizing everything that I have learned. And it's because I started something that was not many people having experience. I became, very few people that having you know, the experience to work on this, and um, and I kept going. And ultimately, Google came, invited me for interview, but I didn't think much. Um, I thought Google was just another company. I never aimed to become a Googler or come to big companies. I was, satisfied with everything that I have. But the second time when it came, I said to myself, okay, let's try. And by the time I took the opportunity, I realized, oh my God, the interview took like 4 to 5 months. Um, why is it so hard? But very fortunate that I passed the interview and got the job. And when I came in, I realized, holy cow, this is why people want to come in here. Because once you're in, you basically good for life. Good, compensation, insurance, free food, more than 80s restaurants every day, free massage, like everything, right? Like you don't have to drive to work. There's shuttle come and pick you up to work, and it's like a whole different world. And I got depressed for a little while, like in the first 3 months, because I thought this, I never thought there's a world like this exists. But yeah, like it's a long journey. But one of the things that I've learned is that what made me be able to do what I did was I always do things before the curve or before the norms, like the that everybody are aware of. So
What I'm taking out of this is that actually everything that you've been doing and up to this point, everything that you've shared, you were starting really young with your drawing and your design journey, and you're just following your passion, like you're just following your heart, and that's just it. And I think a lot of people, like when you mentioned that you did not follow the trend, is because that wasn't even something that was in your mind. Like all you wanted was just to follow your passion and just to do what makes you happy. So I think what I'm taking away from this right now is just that, just do what lights you up. Just do what fuels your passion, and that's just it. Like there's gonna be a million trends to follow, and it's gonna be ever changing, and it's impossible for us to or be like a trendsetter when that's all the intention that you have. But the intention, like, and we talk about this a lot on this podcast as well, like really chasing your passion and finding that. I think that's so beautiful what you just shared, because I also feel that, everyone who come on this pod is because we are doing something different. And doing something different can be a very lonely and isolating journey. But it is also because of that part of us inside of us that we have enables us to live this different life. And eventually it becomes of something like what you said, how far that you've come. And I know that before this recording started, we were also talking about, both of us coming from Asian backgrounds, and this is almost unheard of, like doing something unconventional, like us not going to college. And then I'm sure back in the days when you first started graphic design, like you mentioned, like it wasn't even a thing, and people must have so many questions, so many judgments, and like me, that I started doing this podcast 3 years ago. Even now in Hong Kong, podcast is still not a thing, and people question like, why are you doing this? So is there anything on this that you can share with us? I'm sure you have received a lot of questions, from friends and family around you, people who don't understand? Like, how do you work with that?
Yeah, I think this is a very great question. Like you said, it is a very lonely journey. It has always been, and it's not easy. And I totally agree on the aspects of like sometimes you don't need to know all the answers. You just need to do what's right at the moment. And that's why I really love the book, The Atomic Habits. Um, right, just focus on 1% per day, rather than 5 years. Who am I going to be? Right. Usually that's how you're gonna get very depressed. But instead, let's just focus on things that you can do right away, just within today, and tomorrow you can do better. That's already good enough. And especially when I look back, at a young age, sometimes I lack the knowledge and the words to describe what I really want. And I think that's totally fine. That's just part of the journey. In terms of dealing with like criticism and, people around me, yeah, like nobody trusted me. Like even my dad, like he never took me seriously. And I think my dad was the reason why I got very depressed at the first. I got judged a lot. I got pushed back a lot. I Nobody really listened to me. And it was so hard, to get just somebody to listen and to understand, what you want to do. And sometimes I wish I could have the support. I don't need anybody to give me anything. I just need somebody to just listen to what I have to say. And I remember before I came to the States, I told my dad, here's my plan coming to the States, and this is what I'll be doing to keep going. And then he just like immediately saying, you're dreaming too much, boy. You're not going to be able to make it. And he yelled at me, and I cried in front of him. Because from my point of view, I'm very serious about my life and my career, but nobody took it seriously. Um, and it's hard. And my I heard stories of like my relatives, making fun of me during high school. They said things to my mom like, "Oh, like I never thought Astro going to pass high school." Yeah, because because of depression and everything, I didn't seriously, study in school. And for me, it was very boring because I thought so much about the human aspects that I never, put any attention to the subjects that I was studying in school. And I got bullied as well, like in school, because I never talked to anybody. During break time, I was just standing at a corner, not talking to anybody. And then, kids would come around and bully me, and I kept getting into fights and stuff like that. Yeah, it was very challenging. I cried a lot. I suffer a lot. And that was the reason why, for my posts and when I shared my story online, I try to give people the answer that yes, I got everything that I wanted. It's a win to me. Success is the sweetest revenge. And once you get there, once you have everything, you want to remind people that life that is not the answer. When I got everything and I realized, oh, I was living for a cause from my past. It's not me. This is not me. The success that I got, the everything that I've got this far, this is not me. This is not what I wanted. But I became a victim of society. I became a victim of social standards. And it's sad because I never worked for money in the past 18 years of my career. I never aimed for money. Never. But I became a victim of it. And so I think environment is very important. Surround yourself with the right people, the right friends, the people who support you. That was something that I didn't have throughout my journey. I was extremely isolated and not talking to anybody. But now, when I realize and looking back, I thought that was uh, my mistake was not, like having friends, because friends will be there for you. And in the past 6 months since I shared my story, I have so many new friends. Um, and I feel so much better and I feel good. And now I'm living for myself, my true self, and not because of what the past made me, um, but I'm so much better now. So
That is so beautiful. And honestly, I resonate with that on so many levels because there is such a strong standard in this society, coming from like an Asian background of who you're supposed to be. And when you don't fit that mold, people, it's not even that you isolate yourself, they isolate you and people treat you differently. So I'm just so glad that you are now, here to share your story and creating that company, that talks about mental health, because I think for both of us, that's what we're creating. We're creating the community. We're creating what we didn't have in the past, to provide this opportunity and platform for people who were just like us, experiencing very similar things, and they don't know where to turn. And now, they have all these resources and all these people like you and me, they can I mean, I personally don't say like I don't think people would like look up to me, but at least stories that they can relate to, stories like that will make them feel like they're not alone.
right, I agree. And my story seems to break a lot of rules, but I think sometimes rules have to be broken, and I think that that is something very hard to do when you're young. You don't know what is the right thing to break, but for me, always question why. And you don't have to be everybody. You can just be you and do what you believe and be who you are. And I think now, since we have social media, we tends to mirror those personalities or wanted to become everyone else. And it's so important to remind people that authenticity, honesty are the values that most important these days. And that's the reason why I founded Mirror. Just for that reason, is to remind people about self-discovery, self-love, and self-discipline. And we should be authentic and be raw and be who you are.
Another thing that I'm picking up from your sharing is that your story don't end. Like, when we're experiencing something at that moment, it might feel like the biggest obstacle, the biggest challenge in the world. And we feel like this is our only story. But no, it's not. And like from what you shared, like you've had so many different chapters in your life and it's still ongoing. So I think it's just so inspiring, for me and the audience to really realize that we create our different chapters and we can live all these different lives and it's still ongoing. Like it doesn't stop if unless we stop.
Yeah, I totally agree. For me, I think life is just like a movie, and it's up to you to write the script. And I think the hardest part for me was after success, everything that you've learned and you've got, good job, good money, and big houses and nice cars, and what's next, right? And sometimes it's really hard to know what's next. And the biggest, like opponent to me is not the people around you, but it's actually you. You are the highest mountain that you have to overcome. And lucky for me, I went back to my original source, why I existed, why I try so hard for the past like over 20 years, right? It gave me a sense of purpose by understanding me and knowing that depression has damaged me in so many different ways. Why can't you do something about it? And that's when I realized I no longer prioritize my own needs and wants, but I want to prioritize the people who are in the same situation like me and help those people. And that's my next chapter. And sometimes that's how you're gonna roll and write the script of your movie. It's about you. It's about the people around you. It's about how you're gonna like help people to understand who you are and why you matter, and that will give you a lot of inspiration and resources to keep going and keep writing and keep producing. And it's hard. It's not easy, but I think life is a journey. It's not a destination.
I know that this to the audience, like this might be something that you've heard so many times, but when you put it into, tie it into your story, into this context, it is so true. It really is a journey in the process. And now that you're helping others, who are going through what you've been through. So can you tell us a little bit more about Murror actually?
Yeah. So Murror is an AI assistant that helps you on your journey to discover you. That's why there's a you in the mirror word. Yeah, the world within you. I think these days, just like I mentioned, social media, social networks has impacted young people's mental health in a big way, and they are facing anxiety and depression because of the uncertainty about their futures. They often doubt about themselves, not knowing who they are, comparing themselves with their colleagues and friends. So there's a identity crisis that's happening about the Gen Z. And growing up very similar, like on the journey of discovering myself, because Gen Z tends to grow up much faster than other generations because of their ability to access the internet much earlier with technology. They're very advanced in terms of like knowledge and accessing the internet. They grew up very fast, and I find that to be very similar to how I grew up. And I understand how hard it is to keep questioning yourself, like who you're gonna be, will you do good, will you succeed, and things like that. So I want to create an app using AI to at least um, assisting young people on their ways of self-discovery, because especially in the Asian communities, when you have internal struggles, you don't tend to talk to other people, especially your parents. You feel like there's a gap. You don't want to talk. And if you don't talk about it, like it's not healthy. And it might get you to clinical depression, which is long term depression. And it's very hard to cure or very hard to work with. So I want to intervene. I want to create a tool that at least, like when you say you're sad because, like for example, you just lost your job, the AI could say sometimes changing a job could offer a new experience. Just give people a sense of hope, a sense of like there's a way out, there's light at the end of the tunnel, right? And they don't have to like expose like they're thinking because of privacy reasons in Asian culture. But with privacy, you can keep it to yourself, but at least it's the first step of speaking out, seeking for help, care about yourself. So it's more of a journaling experience of you know uh, converse with yourself and the AI assistance, and you will know your strengths, your weaknesses, always seeing the positive things about yourself, and that's about your.
That's amazing. Like you said, like I think this really is just the first step, and sometimes it only takes the first step for you to reach out to express, and that prevents all the steps that comes along, with like a mental health illness. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And before we go into the last question, is there anything else that you would like to add? Any advice? Any tips?
Yeah, I think what I've learned is that the journey finding you will always be difficult and hard, and sometimes you don't have anybody to believe in you. But to succeed, to win in life, sometimes you have to believe in yourself and give yourself a chance, and always try to see the bright side of darkness, and don't give up. All greatness in life often achieved with with grit, determinations, and hardship, and tears, and that's very normal. Because when I was on my journey, I thought my life is wrong. Why is it so hard? And I kept questioning myself, and I thought of like killing myself because I didn't find meaning. But in fact, when I looked at all the great people in the world, they always went through the same situation. The same journey is hard and it's tough, and there will always a sacrifice, and it's okay to to go through that, and always looking beyond negativity, and always looking at like the positive aspects of things, and you be fine.
I love that so much. And that actually just ties right in with the final question. You know, everything that you mentioned about self love and self acceptance. So, can you now share with us just one thing that you love about yourself?
Me, I love being reflective. I think in the end of the day, everything that I did, I I often sit down and try to listen to myself, and see what can be done better, what I'm not good at, what I'm good at, and that gave me a lot of insights to what I should and what I should not do. And very often I try not to please everybody, so that's why the reflection aspect helps me to see where I'll fit. Very often people would mirror from outside in, but for me, I like to approach everything from inside out, because when I start inside out, I know that this is personal, and when it's personal, I mean it. I will do my best. I will be there. I will show up because I care. The same thing as my company. I do it because this is my destiny. I care so much. I have so much pain with this problem that I would never give up. And I think by being reflective, it helps me to understand very clearly who I am and where I'm going to be. And that's going to like fit me into a narrative that only me be able to differentiate me with others.
I think that is actually something that we all need to, learn and be a little bit more self-aware of, going more inwards, especially now in a time where you compare yourself and you get compared online, and there's so many things out there that did not exist when I was a kid, that now, you know, even just going to school as a teenager, like I see them, I see that that there's so many different aspects of comparison that is present. So I think that is something that is just so important, to go back to yourself and to feel, and to it's just a process of self-learning, self-understanding, and I think what we've been talking about throughout all this time, just going inwards.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I think it is such an important topic moving forward. Um, I think the world will look for more authenticity, and people with origins and honesty, because ultimately all tools will be extremely smart, and we can use AI to solve everything. But then what is it? What's next, right? And I think it will go back to like our inner self, and be authentic and be raw. And yeah, so yeah, I think that's how the world's going to be.
I completely agree with that. Just I mean, I don't know much about technology, but just having that very, very little understanding, I feel like at the end of the day, what cannot be replaced is a human touch, right? So, I mean, thank you so much for bringing your authenticity and your honesty and your truth onto this podcast today, and for sharing with us. So, before we go, can you just tell everyone, where can they find you? Maybe on like Instagram or your website.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram under Astro Vin, ASTROVINH, or you can contact me through my work, through Murror.app. That's where you're gonna find the link to my company, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or any thoughts from everyone, or Facebook, uh, under the name Vin Tran, and then Astro in a
I'll
bracket.
put everything in the show notes so everyone can find easily. Well, thank you so much once again for being here today. I think I personally also learned so much